Hello Sterling, Colorado, and all you YouTubers. This is Michelle Me back with you from the Nostalgic Ceramic Studio. And today we're going to be hand building a mug. And so we really want to go through that project with you so you can kind of get a feel for, how we're going to build. Now, hand-built mugs are a very special commodity because a lot of the times we forget about how special they can be, especially when we're throwing on the wheel. It's so much fun to throw a mug on the wheel. Well, there's a special thing about hand-built mugs, and that's that you can do things and get as creative with them in ways that you never could on the wheel. So if you wanted to make a completely square mug, guess what? That's a little harder to do on the wheel than it would be to hand build. Or what if you want your mug to have texture? What if you want it to be a sweater with cute little buttons going down the front of it? There's so many different creative ways for us to build mugs using a slab. And so that's what we're gonna focus on today, and I hope you join along, and let's get going. All right, so let's get started with some of the tools and materials that we're going to be needing to hand build our mugs today. First of all, I've got this cookie rolling pin, and this one in particular is for the Mile High City because we are in Colorado. I found this at Stone Leaf Pottery. I think that there was like maybe two or three more of them. So if you're in Colorado and you want one of these, that's where you can pick it up at. It's got all sorts of neat stuff. It's got Welcome to Colorful Colorado, Colorado Native License Plate, the Columbine, which is our native flower, Interstate 25, Mile High, and then it's got 5,280 feet above sea level on it. We've got hikers and moose and the flag and all sorts of stuff, skiing, everything, camping, all of it. Anyway, so there's that. Then you're gonna need a yellow rib. I like the yellow rib for compressing my clay. This is my thumb tool. I don't know where I picked this. I don't know what brand this is, but I picked that up at Stone Leaf Pottery also. You're gonna need a serrated rib or a scratch tool for slipping and scoring. This one here is Mud Tools, a needle tool. This is just a rubber tool that I use to clean up my seams. A fettling knife. This one here is Dolan Tools. This here is, I believe, a 6-inch round cookie cutter. It might be 5-inch, actually. Let's see, this is, I was off. This is a 3.5-inch round cookie cutter. And then here I have myself a template from Craft Foam, and it is a rectangle. It's 5.5 by 9.5, and this fits around this cookie cutter just about perfectly. Might be a little bit big, but that's okay because it tends to stretch sometimes when you put it on there. So especially after we roll the texture in it, our slab will stretch a little. So anyway, it'll be fine. Here we have just a brush to clean up seams or clean up inside the mug if we need to get in there with a brush. We have a wear board. We have water and a sponge. Of course, we have our clay. We have our slip, and here I have a banding wheel. This makes things a lot easier if you have one. If you don't have one, that's okay, you don't need one. So, and then right here, we obviously have our slab of clay. So let me get this all cleaned up and then we will get started. Today I am using a mid-range stoneware with a little bit of grog in it. It's fine grog to test out for hand building. We'll see how this goes. And then off to the side over here, I've already thrown my handles, 2 handles, because you always want an extra one just in case, right? Something doesn't work out or you like the look or feel of another one over the other. And if you need a detailed video on how to do that, I will go ahead and link the video for throwing handles in the show notes below. Okay, so to start, as always, we're gonna go ahead and compress our clay, get rid of any texture that's in it, pop any air bubbles that we have, and we're doing that on both sides. And I'm going in every direction, and I'm pressing quite firmly on the slab here. Not necessarily firm enough to stretch the clay, but firm enough to remove texture, bring any air bubbles to the surface, things like that. So we've done that, we're gonna go ahead and flip it over and do the other side. I'm gonna start by making sure this isn't stuck to my table here. And we're gonna flip this over. I kind of slap it down like this because as I've talked before in several of my other videos, that clay has a memory and it tends to want to warp to whatever its memory is. And so when I lifted that up, we kind of created a new memory, and slapping it back down gets the memory back to a flat slab, along with this compressing. So we're just going in every direction. There is I managed to get something in the clay right there, and I just kind of want to pop that out. Not sure what that was. And you see how that going in every direction just kind of removed that hole altogether. It's kind of what would happen if there was an air bubble in it too. All right. So the next step is to make sure it's not stuck to the table again. So we're just going to kind of lift up on both sides. And then we're gonna go ahead and roll in our texture. So I want the texture to be facing you, so I'm gonna roll it this way. I don't typically use the handles on the rolling pin. I tend to go over the top and rock it across like this. That way I can get firm, even pressure along the entire mat, or along the entire slab. I'm gonna line it up here, roll again, and the last one. Okay, so for the final time, we're gonna lift up, make sure we're not stuck to the table. Okay. So that's really cute. I really like this roller. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start laying out my pieces and cutting the places that I think got the best texture. Maybe like here, or here maybe. This area is really good. So I think I'm gonna but it's not long enough for this. So I think I'm gonna cut my base, maybe there, and we're gonna be getting, we'd get the sign, welcome to colorful Colorado, the Columbine, the ski lift, I-25 in there. I don't know, this is a hiking tool right here. Or right here we get the skis and the fish and the fire, the buffalo. Or here we get the flag and the sign. I don't know, I could be here all day deciding what I want to do, so I'm just gonna do what I originally wanted here. So there's the base. And then for the mug body, or for the mug walls, I'm thinking I'm gonna go right here. So there's another tool that I like to use for this that I'm gonna run and grab real quick. I just like the yardstick to kind of help me cut those lines straight. If you don't have a yardstick or you don't have anything, a straight edge you can use, you can just hold the craft foam down. You don't have to have this tool. And so I'm gonna cut this side straight up and down, and this side straight up and down, and I'm holding my knife just like this, straight up and down. And then for the seam edges, which is this edge and this edge here, I'm gonna hold my knife at an angle, like a 45-degree angle. I'm gonna cut, come over, and hold my knife at that same exact angle and cut this side. And sometimes it's easier to do this part without the ruler or the yardstick. All right, I like that. And I'm actually gonna make a second one as well. All right, and I'm gonna start pulling this apart. This clay is still very wet and malleable, and so it doesn't need to be reclaimed as long as you get it back into your clay bag right away. So that's where this is going, right back into my bag. Okay. We do have a little bit of an edge. I kind of butted those right up next to each other, and so it's like, and the clay is pretty sticky and tacky still, so I'm just gonna get that out of there. Okay. All right, so now we're gonna just put what we're not using right now off to the side, and we'll let those firm up a little bit and build those later. You don't wanna let the clay, you wanna let the clay firm up enough to where it will hold itself up, right? It'll stand on its own. But you don't want it to be so leather hard that when you bend the mug around this base, it cracks. So, you know, I tend to kind of build them pretty rapidly after I have rolled them out. As long as the clay will hold itself up, you're good to work with it. You just don't want it to get so dry that you have all that cracking. So I'm just going to clean up my workspace here a little. We're going to pull out my banding wheel. Make sure I'm still in frame. Move that up a little and over this way a little. Okay, so now we're going to start with our base right here on our wear board. That way, once we've got this put together, it's we don't have to move it around, and it kind of stays in the form that it is in. Just cleaning this up a little bit, getting any remaining texture off the base there, because once the sidewalls are on, it's going to be really hard to clean the inside of this. So, you know, it's kind of nice to be able to do that before you get started. And then we're going to set that off to the side over here while we work on our mug walls. And so we've kind of made those seams to where they were both cut at an angle, and because of that they should line up really very well. I don't know if you can see that. I'll turn it around this way and maybe flip it up a little. See how that lines up really nicely. So we're going to go ahead and pull out our slip and our score tool and slip and score that together. And I'll turn this around once I'm done here so you can get a good visual of what I've done. Okay, turn this around. So I've scored it, if you can see that. And I've scored on both sides. And now we're going to use our brush here and just apply some slip right on both seams, both edges. You don't need to use so much slip that it makes a big giant mess when you squish it together, but you need to cover the entire seam with slip, and it needs to be enough to like really get a good contact with one another. Like there needs to be slip on every portion of the clay for contact, where it contacts. Okay, so we kind of line that up, and then you can, if you can get your hand in there, I'm supporting on the inside and the outside, and I'm pushing that together. I'm not rubbing, I'm just pushing because I don't want to lose all that texture. That's also where this thumb tool comes in handy, because we can really get in there with the thumb tool and push that seam together. Okay, so I'm gonna lift that up and kind of get my mug rounded. Okay, and so then, you know, we have our seam is together here, but we're not losing a ton of texture. Okay, so then you can kind of clean up the top here where that comes together. Okay, and then on the inside. Okay, and then on the inside here, we're gonna take our tool and smear that seam to close off the edge on the inside. And we're gonna do that all the way up. And just kind of make that seam disappear on the inside of the mug. So if you can see that now, we've just smoothed that completely out. So there's that. And I'm just kind of eyeballing round here. You can use a form if you want your piece to be a perfect, if you want your mug to be a perfect up and down vessel. You could use a form and wrap it around the form. You just have to make sure that you take that form off before it starts to dry and shrink, or you'll crack it. And a lot of people like to do that, to use a form. If you're after a perfect mug, I suppose you could do that, but even then sometimes those mugs don't really come out perfect, just because when you take the form off, you kind of distort them also. So okay, and so I just took my brush and just kind of, I didn't brush it along the seam there to like lose the texture. I just brushed it along to clean up any leftover slip that oozed out from the side. Okay, and so as you can see, this particular roller had an up and a down to it. It was a very obvious upside and a downside. So as you can see, this is the top and this is the bottom. Well, that's the same way you're gonna wanna put that on your base so that your texture isn't upside down. So I'm gonna flip this over. Kind of smooth that off and get that seam cleaned up right there at the edge. And I'm going to slip and score the top of this. Now the base where it gets attached is incredibly important. The base and the handle. It's super important that you get these two pieces to completely adhere in all spots, all the way around, that they're slipped and scored and cross-hatched, right? So cross-hatching on slipping and scoring is going in one direction, but then also going in a different direction. Cross-hatching that score so that your base adheres really well to your mug, because you wouldn't want somebody to be using this and then have the base fall off. Like, you have to make sure that this is attached well. So I'm gonna set this off to the side. We're gonna bring this back in. And again, we're going in a circle here, all the way around. And then we're gonna cross hatch as well. Okay. We're putting slip on both the base and covering every piece of that cross hatching we just put on. right? We're getting slip everywhere, all the way around. We're not leaving any spaces like that right there. We're not leaving any spaces unslipped. I like to say the slip is the glue. Well, in clay, all connections need to be glued. And so we're gonna do the same thing on the top. We're not gonna leave any portion of that unslipped. You don't need to get so much on there that it's dripping like that, but you do need to make sure that the entire base that is touching the walls gets slipped on both sides, on the wall piece and the base piece. Can't reiterate that enough. Okay, so once we're there, oh, see, and look, I've got a little piece that didn't get some on there. We're gonna get it on there. Okay. Okay, so from here, I'm gonna pick this up and do this number, and we're gonna attach that to our base here. You can see that our base is a little bit big. That's okay. You can go in there and kind of stretch that a little bit. I'm eyeballing round, which is fine. If your eyeball says it's round, so does everyone else's. Okay, so we're on there. And what I'm going to do at this point is lift the whole thing up, right? I've got the whole piece. I'm gonna lift the whole piece up and just kind of do a stomp down. And turn as I do that. We're not stomping so hard as to warp the clay, but just enough to really let gravity adhere that base to itself, to the wall. Okay. And so then you can see we've got a little bit of an overhang here. If you've got more overhang in one area than the other, you can kind of cut a little bit of that off. But you can take your thumb tool and roll that up the side. Just like that. All right. For the mugs on the inside, I do encourage a coil. A lot of potters don't use a coil at the seam there. Which is fine, as long as you feel confident that you got that base on there well. I always put the coil in because it is a mug, it is going to be going in the dishwasher, it is going to be potentially used every single morning. And I just want that added reassurance that my base is not going to leak or crack or fall off. The coil doesn't have to be huge, but you know, just added assurance. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this long tool, or if you have another one like this that fits down in there better, either one will work. So I'm just scratching up the side a little ways. That's Kevin, my husband, his phone. Okay. And then we're gonna just go in a circle and do a quick cross hatch on our scoring. And then we're going to do the same thing on our coil here, if you can see that. And again, slip and score both. Okay. Now the way I like to do this is I start by just putting the piece in there. I don't know if you can see that. And then I take my thumb tool to just get it in place there. Just like that. And then as I go around, I can kind of push it into that corner as I go. If you don't have a thumb tool, get one. They're a hand builder's best friend, in my opinion. You don't have to get one like this. There's other tools that look like this. They come in like most beginner hand building toolkits. They're really inexpensive on Amazon, and you can kind of see that this end is similar to this, and you can use that as a thumb tool if that's all you have. Okay, and then when I get around back to the beginning, I just kind of use my thumb tool to pinch that off of there. And then I'm going to start by, let me see if I can get this so that you can see the inside of there as I do this. I'm going to start by pushing all the way around up at the top and then pushing down onto the base. And I'm going to do that all the way around. And because we kind of rolled this edge up at the base here, we kind of rolled that excess clay up around the top, you are less likely to push the wall off of the base of your mug. But if you feel concerned you're going to do that, you can support as you push on the inside. You can support on the outside. You really want this coil to disappear completely. Any seam that you leave will potentially crack. Any seams on a coil that you can still see, you can guarantee almost that they will crack. So you need to smooth this coil into your clay both at the wall portion and at the base portion until it completely disappears. So just take your time with it. I think that these bits and pieces are more important than how round or how perfect the mug is. Again, this is hand built. It's not going to be, we're not trying to make it as nice as we do or as perfectly round as we do on the wheel. Okay, so if you can see that in there. And then if you want to clean that up even further, then you can go in with a damp brush and just smooth everything out with a damp brush until that seam is completely gone. There's no more tool marks. The more time you take on these details, the happier you're going to be with the end result of your project. Okay, so now can you see how that coil just almost entirely disappeared? Okay, so that's how we want that to look. And then on the outside here, where we kind of rolled that excess amount of clay up to the edge, you can kind of see how we have some slip cleanup. I just like to go along the edge like this with my paintbrush and just clean that up a little. All the way around. I'm not putting enough pressure or enough water on to make the texture disappear. I'm just putting enough water and pressure to clean up any slip that kind of oozed up and clean up any rough edges that are at that connection point. Okay. All right. And so from here, you could be done. You could put your handle on that, and that's a mug. And that is a very beginner, this right here with a handle on it would be a very beginner mug. And if you want to stop there, because that's where your skill set is at, you can do that. I'm going around again because I kind of like that indentation at the base. And I also have another tool that I'm going to use. This thing right here to give it a little bit of an undercut. Again, you could use this tool to give it a little bit of an undercut. So if we're back to, you know, ceramics class 101, any pot has an undercut to it. It gives it lift off of the table. And visually speaking, is what our human eye likes to see. So, I don't know if you can see that. What I'm doing here is I'm giving it just an undercut. We do this on the wheel. We do this when we're hand building. We give our pots an undercut so it's not completely flat at the base there to the table. Visually speaking, our human eyes like to see that little bit of shadow that gives the pot a little bit of lift. Just cleaning that up a little bit, getting rid of any sharp edges. And that is the base of my mug. Okay, so you could stop there. Like I said, that could be, you could put your handle on and call that good. If you have access to a banding wheel, you can thin this rim a little bit to give it a more visual appearance of being lightweight. Lots of potters do not do that because the appearance of the girth also is a very masculine type thing. So if you wanted your mug to be more girthy, masculine with a bigger handle, that keeps coffee warmer. It also looks more masculine than feminine. If you wanted to and you have a banding wheel, you can go in a circle like this and just pinch your rim a little bit thinner to give it more visual delicacy, make it look more lightweight, make it maybe a little bit nicer on the lip as you drink from it. This would be a little bit more of an intermediate technique. Doing this, you do lose all of the texture that's at the very top there. Which to me is okay, because I feel like sometimes the texture at the very top is kind of uncomfortable to drink from. Up on your lip. So this would be a little bit of more of an intermediate. You can pinch the top, thin that top out, give it more visual delicacy. You could stop there and put your handle on at this point, which also would be fine. But I'm gonna keep going because I want this mug to have a belly. For that, I'm pulling out my red rib, and I'm gonna go on the inside, and as I turn, I'm gonna do this motion with this rib up against my fingers. So I'm doing this as I'm turning the banding wheel. And that's gonna start to bow out the belly of my mug. I'm supporting the outside. As I go. This technique is pretty difficult to do without a banding wheel. So this would definitely be considered an intermediate technique, because you would need this tool in order to get this belly. This obviously is not going to be as round as it would be if it was on a pottery wheel. But again, if it looks visually round to you, it looks visually round to everyone else. Now I can see that this right here does not look visually round to me. And so you can just, you know, kind of move your hands along it until it does. We can see that that's a belly, that it's bellying out a little. You can keep going and push that belly to the limits of your clay. Stretch it to the limits of your clay. You really need to make sure that your seam is very, very, very well put together. Otherwise, as you go across the seam doing this, you're gonna burst that seam open. Now, I do kind of want to have this shape where it comes out and then goes in a little bit. However, that is a little bit too exaggerated for my taste. And so I'm gonna belly that clear up to the top here. All right, and because of this, we've probably taken you know, maybe an 8-ounce mug and turned it into a 16-ounce mug. This is gonna be a big mug. We've stretched that clay. We've made the walls thinner, and we've made the mug itself bigger. And so now, I'm just gonna kind of go through with my fingers again here and kind of make that rim the shape that I want it to be again, with a slight curve outwards. That outward curve is more comfortable to drink from for most people. It doesn't need to be huge. It doesn't need to be visually obvious. It just needs to be enough to where when you lift the cup up to your mouth and pour it towards your mouth, whatever liquid in it flows very smoothly into your mouth. If you think about it, you know, if this room was pointing in like it was before I flared it out, it'd be pretty difficult to get water out of that lip or any liquid out of that lip into your mouth, because it kind of wants to curve back in on itself as you're tipping it. Which is another thing to keep in mind if you have a vessel that you don't want to tip. You know, if you want the liquid to stay in there without sloshing, then you could have your curve going in instead of out. Just gonna clean up this base where I've got rib marks. Clean up anything in there where my fingernail hit it or where I'm seeing the coil. Okay, and then I'm going to clean that up and put my handle on. Again, with any art, the beauty is in the details, right? So, there we go. I'm happy with that. We've got a little bit of a belly. The inside is cleaned up. Our seam isn't hugely noticeable. On this mug here, I've got a little bump where the seam is. I don't know if you can see that. We've got a little bump right here. If you don't like that, you can just very gently take your tool, your fettling knife, and cut that off. Round it out. And that bump just disappeared. Okay. Some people, some hand builders who hand build for a living, that's all they do. They don't throw on the wheel. Or even maybe hand builders that do throw on the wheel, I don't know. They sometimes like to show the seam, right? They keep the seam on because that shows that it was hand built from a slab. It's part of their design feature. If you don't like that seam, that's where you put your handle, and it kind of hides it and masks it even further. So that's entirely up to you. We'll go ahead and put a handle on real quick. This is the handle I threw earlier. It's the one that I like. It's still pliable, but it's not leaving any fingerprints or marks when I touch it. I'm gonna put that on real quick. If you want a really in-depth, detailed video on how to put a handle on a mug, you're gonna go into the show notes below and watch my video on putting a handle on a mug. I'm gonna move this out of the way and do that for you real quick. Clear off my spaces real quick here. And I'll see if we can kind of put the handle on from the side here so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Let's see, there's our seam. This is not a very big handle, but I think that it is going to work just fine. So I'm going to take my score tool and cross hatch top and bottom. I'm gonna put a little bit of slip on. Put that on there where I'm going to be covering my seam. Lift that up, look at it from every direction, make sure it's not wonky in any which way. I've left a mark with my slip where the handle attaches, so I'm going to cross hatch that. Slip both sides again. Again, this is the handle. This part is a very crucial part of the mug. You do not want it to fall off. And so I'm going to go in there and wiggle, 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 jiggle, 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 and push. Supporting on the inside. Do the same thing down at the bottom. Wiggle, 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 jiggle, 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 and push. Check it in every direction. Make sure we're not off in a wonky way, which we are right there. You know, you can clean up the inside there. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me now. Could go this way even a little bit more. Look at it from here. Make sure we're not off anywhere this direction. You can put a coil around the top there if you want it to look like a branch, a seamless piece coming off the top. You know, do any cleanup that you have. And that's it, the handle's on. So, okay. And I think that would be considered an intermediate mug because it has a pulled handle, it has a belly on it, the coil on the inside that is seamless would make this kind of a hand, you know, an intermediate hand built, okay? Now, one way that you can make this top round after it's a little bit firmer than it is now, once it's leather hard, you can take a mushroom tool and put that in there and twist it around, make it real round. Some people can get those terracotta pots in every single different size. Some people use terracotta pots. I have these two bowls that I threw when I was first starting out in pottery. That I keep as my beginner pieces, and you know, sometimes I use those to kind of make that perfectly round. Again, you kind of want to wait till it's leather hard to do that, but as you can see, that kind of made me round there, so that at least from the top looking down, it visually looks perfectly round. And there is your intermediate hand-built mug. Again, a beginner mug, you would maybe, instead of pulling a handle, you would cut the handle out from your slab. Like I could take this piece here, right? And use my ruler or my yardstick and cut that and make that into a handle. That would be a beginner handle. And then as far as an advanced mug, we have a couple here. This is the advanced mug that I built, and it's trees and leaves and cutouts, and the base is not flat. This was made from 3 pieces. Looks kind of like a barrel or a beer stein to me, I don't know. But that would be advanced. We've got the belly, we've got the thin rim, we've got the pulled handle, we've got this interesting foot where only these 4 portions touch the table. Okay. Another advanced piece would be a shape that is somewhat square at the bottom. It comes in, is round at the top. We've got a really interesting handle. We've got some hand-built pieces attached. I turned this one into a planter, like a little succulent planter, because I think that's cute in the garden, right? for the base on that one, I just used, you can see the marks. This is the base of that mug. It's just a jar that I had for slip. I cut this shape out of craft foam, and when you put it together, you get this interlocking. You know, you put all of those pieces together. As you can see, this piece was coiled at each one of those joints, but you cannot tell that there's a coil anywhere. It is completely one piece with the mug. There was also a coil that went around the base there. We've got an indent piece that goes around here for added detail. We've got our base is textured. We've got a very interesting handle. This would be considered an advanced as well, hand build. So if you want to join us if you're in Sterling, if you're local and you want to join in, we will be hand building a beginner, an intermediate, or an advanced, wherever you're at with your skill level. We will be hand building a mug in a workshop on March 22nd from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. So, or there's also an afternoon class. It's from 12, I think it's from 12:30 to 2:30, I believe, or it might be 12 to 2:30. But you can go online and sign up for the workshop at www.nostalgicceramics.com and go into the section on the website that says workshops and purchase your ticket. We're doing that again on March 22nd in the afternoon and in the evening. I hope you join us. If you don't, I hope you try this at home. And thanks for tuning in. I will catch you in the next video.